Hello students, this is Professor McDonald. These will be my comments relative to Chapter 9, Sexual Assaults. Important chapter, covers multiple crimes to include sexual rape, different types of rapes, child sexual abuse, pedophilia, and some of the other nuisance sexual behavior crimes that you also may come in contact with as a criminal investigator. These are very important cases to work. Agencies and departments that investigate these crimes have to have highly professional and well-trained individuals to work these cases. They're very challenging and they're very important, not only to the department to resolve, but also to the community and to the victims themselves. Let's start off with just saying the sexual assault of adult victims involves non-consensual sexual conduct, such as forcible rape. In cases of sexual assaults involving children, the issue is not consent, as children are incapable of consent, incapable of providing consent. That's how the law looks at it. If you're a child, you are not at the age where consent would be assumed. And that would be your statutory rape cases. What you're going to find in adult offenses, that these assaults are motivated not so much by sexual desire, but by expressions of power and hate at times. And when you get into child molestation cases with pedophiles, they say that they do it for love of the child, but it's really to take advantage of the child for their own personal gratifications. And that can include anything from fondling a child to murder. It's important to, well, let me just talk quick about what rape is, and then I'll talk about the investigation of rape. Forcible rape, again, is an act of violence. It's not a crime of sexual desire, but brutal violence, as in murder with intent and malice. It should be investigated, and we should follow the evidence as to where it takes. When I worked rape investigations, I always took the victim's word, and I followed the evidence. And that served me well in these type of cases. It's important that you have to prove that the defendant or the perpetrator in these cases forced the sexual act on the individual and overcame that consent, overcame the will of the female victims. Yes, males can be raped as well, but for my discussion here with rape, I'm going to talk primarily about female victims. And how do they overcome that will? It's through force or the threat of the use of force. If you hold a gun or a knife to someone, administration of drugs, including alcohol, or slip somebody something in their drink, that also is a means to overcome the will of the female. Incapacity, and that could be the victim's physical or mental condition, or even their age, that could overcome the will. And then we have aggravated rape, which is a crime on the books in many state legislatures where a rapist is armed with a dangerous weapon. They kidnap the victims, they inflict bodily injury. There's also a thing especially prevalent on college campuses called date rape or acquaintance rape. And that's male sexual aggression in which the female is forced to have sexual intercourse. And yes, when a female says no, she means no. And just because an individual knows somebody, that doesn't give them the right to force them to engage in sexual activity. And just remember again that a man can also be victimized sexually. Now, the important thing in these investigations, there's a good chart of how these investigations flow on page 179. But the first thing is to render aid to the victim. The victims in these cases have just gone through the most traumatic event of their life, and they need assistance, many times both medical and psychological. So that is your first step. Your second step as a professional officer responding to the crime, obviously, is when the victim is able to do an in-depth interview to find out exactly what happened and who did it and where it happened, because you have a crime scene out there that you need to secure and process. And in many cases, if you can identify a suspect quickly and have that person apprehended, there is evidence that can be obtained from that individual. Remember the transfer evidence rule. If there was a skirmish, if there was a fight, there could be bruises. There could be other transfer evidence such as hair, etc., on the suspect themselves. And of course, at the conclusion of the interview, you want to ask the victim to consent to a medical examination where physical evidence can be recovered. They call it a rape kit. And for example, if there is semen present in the female after the assault, then that can be collected. And as we've learned already, that DNA can be extracted from semen, and this is a powerful tool in connecting an individual to the scene of the crime. You also want to document all the injuries on the victim, and these are all things that contribute to supporting the victim's allegation. And of course, the victim is going to be your primary source, really, when you look into the victim's background and identify. If you don't know who the suspect is, identifying suspects and investigative leads from individuals that know the victim. Then once you get to the crime scene, the evidence you collect at that crime scene can also lead you and develop leads that can lead you to a suspect in these cases. You always want to maintain a positive relationship with the victim, because this victim, you will need this victim not only through the investigative stages, but also when you get to prosecution. You may also, if the victim can identify the suspect, you might be involved in a physical lineup, or maybe a identikit or a police artist can be used to provide a description of a suspect, if the person's name, if it's a stranger rape. And there's a lot of databases out there that can be searched relative to potential suspects. But again, it's real important to have that relationship with the victim. It also helps you, and of course, there might be potential witnesses out there, and you need to aggressively follow up those interviews and see where those interviews lead and what other leads are developed from those interviews. In the textbook, they talk about some of the personality profiles of the serial rapist, and I'll let you read those for yourself. But there's the anger rapist, commits the crime of rape as a means of expressing and discharging feelings of pent-up anger. The most predominant rapist is the power rapist. He uses sex as a means of compensating for underlying feelings of inadequacy and to express issues of mastery, strength, authority. So it's not a sexual thing, it's more a power trip that the perpetrator is on. And then there's a picture of Ted Bundy, who was the subject of our discussion board number 2. He was a sadistic rapist who was involved not only in the planning, identification of victims, the stalking of victims, the abduction, the abuse, and sometimes murder of victims after he had sexually abused them, inflicting pain and sexual gratification for himself through that pain. Now, many times the actual identification of a suspect is the hardest thing, especially if it's a stranger rapist. And also identifying, many rapists use masks and things to cover up their identity. It's interesting, in the textbook they talk about a case where in New York where a rapist was identified, who had worn a mask, was actually identified by his voice. They did a voice identification procedure, and the victim was able to identify his voice, and they were successfully able to prosecute that case. Statutory rape is rape with a minor. You have to investigate or look at the laws within your own individual state as to where the age of consent is. In North Carolina, I know a juvenile is below the age of 16. Each state is different as to how they term a minor. And so really, in these type of cases, they normally come to the forefront when the victim, if it's a female, becomes pregnant or they're caught in the act. So the consent issue is not something that's a problem in trying to prosecute somebody for statutory rape. All you have to prove is that sexual relations occurred and that one of the individuals was below the age of consent. It's that simple. So it's not the same challenges as you get with an adult rape case. There's also, I guarantee you're going to be involved in nuisance sexual behavior, and this could be your voyeurism, your peeping toms, your exhibitionist. your frottage, which is the realization of sexual gratification by rubbing up against body parts of other persons. Believe me, there are these folks out there, and you will, if you work in this field, become engaged in these sort of investigations. Important cases are child sexual abuse cases, and the textbook goes into great detail into the different types of child molesters. It talks about incest, sexual intercourse with a person known to be within the relationship, such as a parent-child. Most state laws use a broad definition of incest, any sexual contact between blood-related family members who are not permitted such behavior by social norms. There's also pedophilia. A pedophile is someone who loves children, but this love of children is really manifests itself by his sexual interests that range from fondling to mutilation and murder. You have the situational and the preferential child molester, so make sure you read about the different types of child molesters. And because these are important investigations, not only because of the social harm they cause, but also the victims themselves are children. And these are our most vulnerable, next to elderly people, our most vulnerable citizens in our country. So police investigators have a great responsibility to detect and discover child sexual molestation. And this can even manifest itself into child pornography, which I've worked many of those cases, where individuals sell images and videos of the sexual exploitation of children. There's a good chart on page 188 relative to how these investigations proceed. Children are also special witnesses. You have to have highly trained individuals that know how to question children professionally to make sure that the information that they get is accurate to the best of their ability. Children want to please, so if you're highly suggestive in these interviews, there's a good chance you could get information that is not correct, and somebody actually could be charged with a crime that they didn't commit. So it's very, very important, and we've had multiple instances. In the book they talk about the McMartin preschool case, and so it's very important that you have individuals that are trained in how to properly interview children, so to avoid the chance of developing a case against an innocent person. And this could be just the structure of the interview. There's certain things you don't do when interviewing children. You don't suggest anything to them. It has to be open-ended questions, and even to the parents, because they have a stake in this and they can become very incensed, and you can't suggest anything to them. You don't reveal the allegations of other children. You don't use dolls of any kind until subsequent interviews, and only with good reason. And you definitely don't want to avoid news releases to the press on these, not only on children cases, but any sexual assault case, unless you have an adult case and you're looking for a suspect, and then you can use the press to your advantage. But anyway, it's a good chapter. It's got a lot of good information, and if you have any questions, just reach out to me. That'll be the end of this dictation.